Welcome to the Write the Damn Book Already podcast. My name is Elizabeth Lyons. I'm a 6-time author and book editor, and I help people write and publish powerful, thought-provoking, wildly entertaining books without any more overthinking, second-guessing, or overwhelm than absolutely necessary. Because let's face it, some overthinking, second-guessing, and overwhelm is going to come with the territory if you're anything like me. I believe that story and shared perspective are two of the most potent ways we connect with one another, and that your story, perspective, and insights are destined to become someone else's favorite resource or pastime. For more book writing and publishing tips and solutions, and plenty of free and low-cost resources, visit publishaprofitablebook.com. And for recommendations of fabulous books you've possibly never heard of, book writing inspiration, and the occasional meme so relatable you'll wonder if it was created with you in mind, follow me on Instagram at Elizabeth Lyons Author. Well, hello, and welcome to this next episode of Write the Damn Book Already. Before we hop in, I want to let everyone know that the replays of all of the workshops that I have done and will do are now available. So if you weren't able to join live, you can purchase the replays, and they are still pay what you can, starting at $10. We have got everything from social media for authors, email marketing for authors, how to create an incredible audiobook, how to calm the F down. That's not the official title of the workshop, but it's what Rachel Friedman teaches you to do in that workshop for authors, how to create amazing pre-order and swag packages, and as of today, how to start a podcast. So if for any reason you missed out on any of those workshops and would like a jam-packed, no fluff, straight to the point training that gets you from where you are to where you want to be in any of those areas, or at least helps you take the next best step for you, you can visit publishaprofitablebook.com, click on the programs link, and scroll down to the instant access workshops. In today's episode, I spoke with Donna Hemans, who is the author of The House of Plain Truth, which comes out January 30th of 2024 with Zibby Books. I don't do these interviews in video format yet. I don't know that I ever will. And sometimes I think that is such a blessing to everyone involved, because if people could see me cheering and doing all the things I'm doing as authors are giving the answers to the questions with so much transparency and so much honesty, which I guess those two go hand in hand, I might look like more of a raving lunatic than people already think I am. There is just nothing that makes me more happy than authors, or anyone for that matter, who can truly help other people who want to do what they're doing by letting them know exactly how it's done. And the fact that there's no magic bullet or quick fix or immediate shot to stardom is, in my opinion, the greatest gift. And I loved this conversation with Donna, talking about, this is actually her third book, The House of Plain Truth, and speaking about her first two, how her process has changed throughout the course of writing the three and the fourth, which she's working on right now, her publishing experience, and the business she runs in DC that could honestly compel me to live in DC. I have linked all of Donna's information, where you can find her, of course, where you can purchase her books, in the show notes. Let's dive into the interview. The House of Plain Truth is your third book, yes? So I'm curious about a lot of things, but the first thing is, what, if anything, changed about your writing process between books 1, 2, and 3?
Well, pretty much everything.
Okay.
Yeah. So book 2 was actually the fourth book I started writing. So,
Really?
yes. And so The House of Plain Truth was the third book I started writing, but which is actually coming out as a third book. But it's something that I started in around 2006. And it was just one of those stories that, for me, just felt hard to write because I couldn't quite get the story right. I knew what I wanted to do. I knew a portion of it would be set in Cuba, a portion of it in Jamaica. But how to tell that story itself was the difficult part. And I think a lot of it really was when the story first came to me, it was through the perspective of a young woman telling her grand aunt's story. And, that young woman, she had no life. She was 18 years old, just graduated from high school. She had no reason to exist other than to tell this older woman's story. And so it just didn't quite work because I couldn't get her sufficiently involved in the story or give enough of her to make readers find her interesting. The older woman's story was interesting. The family story was interesting, but this young woman's story was just not quite right there.
Okay. Because the House of Plain Truth is based a lot on your experience, right? Like
somewhat, yeah, on my family story.
Your family's, right. So was the second one was Tea by the Sea, right? Was that one not complete? Was that completely fictionalized?
Yeah, that was just completely fictionalized, right.
Okay.
So, and I think those are, in some ways, the differences. I think with the House of Plain Truth, I was also writing based on a lot of research that I had done, whereas with the Voices from the Sea was a little bit fresher and newer and didn't require that level of research. And so, I think as a writer, a part of it is trying to figure out, well, you have now gathered all of this information, how much of it needs to be in the story and how much of it is just information that you now just know. And it takes a lot, for a writer, especially a fiction writer, to figure out what really matters, what drives the story. And, is it just a nice little fact that you're going to be able to tell people when you get to a party, or does it belong in the book?
Well, and I think, did you have that experience? That was one of my questions about the House of Plain Truth did you have that experience there too, where sometimes authors are so emotionally connected to their story and to pieces of their story and people in their story that they conflate what they want to include so as not to make someone invisible with what actually helps to tell the story and build the story for the reader?
In some ways, yes. But I guess the good thing for me is that the pieces of it that are actually true are very small. My grandparents went to Cuba and lived and worked in Cuba, then came back to Jamaica. And so that I knew. The thing for me is that my grandmother died when I was 16 and my grandfather when I was about 19. So I really didn't have enough time to ask them their stories. So I wanted to try to fill in the gaps by doing all of this research and figuring out what their stories could have been like. So I wanted to make sure that I had two people who sort of reflected my grandparents in the book. And then there was this other woman, Pearline, who is older than I am, who doesn't reflect like anybody in my family.
Okay. So that part is fiction.
Right. Yeah.
Wow. Which is amazing to me because the detail on her, I mean, it's the mark of great writing is when the detail of a purely fictitious character, they become so real in the reader's mind. And she's so real in my mind. Like the detail is just so good. And in looking at Tea by the Sea, I am so intrigued because my grandfather was an Episcopal priest.
Oh, okay.
So it's like a weird, it's so fun to me how the little things will grab you about something. I mean, once I'm into an author or once anyone's into an author, they'll often just go read everything they've written.
Right.
It's fun though to see, I want to read that one next because that piece is intriguing.
Right. Yeah. Okay.
How long have you been writing books?
Pretty much a good 20 years. I don't know.
Yeah. I mean, your first one came out in 2002, right?
Yeah. 2002. Right. Yeah. And that was my thesis when I finished my grad program at AU. So it's, it's been right. Yeah. So in between those two books, between 2002 and 2020, I wrote two other books. Yeah. So the House of Plain Truth was one of those two. And the book that I'm working on now was a second book that I started writing. And again, a lot of the same kind of issues with how do I really tell this story? With, what I know I want to do and what the product that I want it to be and making sure that what I end up with is truly the story that I want to tell.
So where does your plot process start? Like, do you just get, I find this fascinating where people's, like, do you just get an idea for a thing that happens or a character, or maybe it shifts? How does that all come about for you? And then you decide what to build up?
Right. A lot of times it's just a character. I
Uh-huh.
just have a voice, a sentence or two, and it just feels like it needs something long. It needs a lot of space for that story to grow. So I can easily tell when something is a short story or when something is a novel. And it really just starts with just this very small thing. And it just feels that way. So I
Okay.
think a lot of it is starting with that character, having a sense of what that place is, and then building from there. So a lot of times I have a sense of where I want to end up, but not necessarily all of what happens in the middle. All of that is what comes as I'm writing.
So do you ever think that something is a short story, but then it becomes more? Or the reverse, where you think something might be a full book, but then you trick yourself because you think I'm stuck. And so maybe this is only a short story?
Yeah, I actually have one short story or one piece that I thought was a short story, but now which I think might end up being something longer. I still haven't figured out exactly how it's going to come together as this long piece. It could be a collection of short stories. It could be just me taking one idea from that story and building it into something bigger. But yeah, it's nice. It's a nice problem to have because you always have ideas, you always have stories. So
Mhm.
something that you can fall back to at some point. It may work, it may not work, and it may take some time. Certainly as I have seen with both of my books that, once I have something and I start working on it, I don't throw it away completely. It just, it might sit for a while, but I will keep
Yeah.
coming back to it until I figure out how to tell it.
So how much do you need to figure out before you start writing it?
Not very
Not
much.
much. Okay.
Yeah, I start writing. Yeah, I've never really outlined. I know I hear people.
Really?
Yeah, I don't want to know everything that happens. I want to figure it out as I go. And I think
Yes.
that's part of the beauty of it. It's the surprise for me. And I think if I'm surprised, then the reader will be as, surprised and interested and intrigued in the story as well.
Well, that's the fun part, I think, is, so many people are plotters and so many are pantsers and so many are plantsers, like somewhere in between. And I'm probably somewhere in between. I have some sense of what happens I know what happens at the beginning. I generally have no clue what's going to happen at the end. I have some ideas of some things that could occur in the middle, but when I start writing it, those things shift.
Right.
And I find that fun, but a lot of people find it very jarring. They start to think like, am I doing this incorrectly? Or maybe I don't know my story, or
And for me, it's part of the process. The
yeah,
first draft might be, one thing, and the second and third draft will be something completely different. Or I shouldn't say completely different. The what stays in the second and third draft may not be what was in the first.
yeah,
And I certainly have all of those drafts, and I fall back to them and pick things out. When I finally figure out, oh yeah, I now know where to put that piece. And so I can easily slip it back in. And so it's not, I like that process. It just feels a
yes,
little bit more organic and it's fun.
fun. Right,
Yeah, it's kind of like
right.
building a puzzle.
Oh my gosh. I use that analogy so often. Donna, you can't imagine the puzzle thing.
Right.
I also use the analogy of a puzzle because, like, right now, truly, if I could show you, I would. I have 1,000-piece New Yorker puzzle on my kitchen table. It has been there since March. I bought it on clearance at Barnes and Noble. It's a Christmas thing, which now it's relevant again. So there you go. But it's a bookstore. It looked fun. It's a total nightmare.
Oh, okay.
So as I'm putting it together, because it's just me, none of my kids, it's like, will someone help me? No. I realize if I just sit down and do one piece a day,
Hmm.
I'll finally get there. But if
Right.
I force myself to think I have to finish it in one day, as an example, I'll never sit down.
Right.
So it's just, do you have as far as a writing schedule, do you write every day? How do you keep yourself accountable?
I try to write every day, but I can't say that I do.
Sure.
Um, but I think a lot of it really is coming back to the story. And I know when I'm not sitting at my desk writing, I'm actually thinking about it. And it's, like a lot of the writing process really for me happens when I am not sitting down, when I'm thinking, when I am, when I get to a point where I can't do anything anymore and I, get in the car and I decide to drive somewhere. And almost immediately is when I think, but there it is. This is what I need to do. So I have a little notebook or I'm using the notes app on my phone and jotting things down because
I'm so glad it's not just me.
There are times I'm sitting in the car and I'm a sentence is there and it feels right. And I can't forget it. I can't forget it. I can't forget it. And as soon as I get a chance, I'm either talking into the phone or,
yes.
just
yes. Or I'll say to one of my kids, if they're in the car with me, like, text me and then fill in the blank. And they used to look at me like, Mom, and now they just do it. They understand, like they get the assignment and they just do it. Oh my gosh. So publishing, you've had 3 different publishers so far. Right. And I'm not, so Washington Square Press, because that was your thesis, the first one?
Right. That was
the River Woman.
Right. Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Yeah, Washington Square Press was it's Simon and Schuster, one of those imprints from very early on that then became Atria, and I'm not sure what it is.
Okay. And then the second one, that was Red Hen. Are they an imprint of someone?
No, Red Hen is an independent press.
Okay, they sounded familiar to me. They're independent.
Right. Mm-hmm.
And that one was featured in O Magazine.
Right.
So tell me about that a little bit, if you would, because so many people think if only I can get featured here or here or here, the whole world will open up and I will never have to work again and everything will be wonderful. And I'm sure that it was an amazing credit, right? And well-deserved. How can you talk a little bit about that experience?
Sure. It really, it just came out of the blue, basically, because I think all of that came about because there's an organization in Jamaica that decided to do a year-end best books of the Caribbean or something. And all the books that won, somebody wrote up about them, and Tea by the Sea won in that category, in the fiction category, and it ended up in Oprah Magazine, which, was surprising.
Sure. Amazing.
Yeah, I think all of that coverage is great. And, regardless of where it is or where it comes from or how it comes, it's good coverage to have. But, there was an article out and about, I think maybe last, sometime in November. And I think, it was a woman who was writing about selling a lot of copies of her book and actually making her advance. Earning out her advance.
Okay.
Right. Okay. Her advance. And, but she was saying, was it worth it? Like she had done all of this press, she had done all of these events, but in the end, it really didn't matter to her. And she said she would never do it again. So,
really?
I think, or never go through that part of the process again, not rushing to earn out her advance so quickly. Okay. And, I think there's so many bits and pieces that I think people looking on, as writers or people who want to publish and say, well, if I do this, then my life really will be great. But, I think all of us as individuals have to step back and really think about what success really means to us individually. Is it the number of copies you sell? Is it being on a certain platform? Is it going to a certain event? All of those things may matter in some way, shape, or form, but they're not necessarily going to make you either a bestseller or make you very rich. And I think the faster we each accept that our circumstances are going to be just very, very different, I think the easier it becomes for us to have a better publishing experience, because we're not looking on and comparing ourselves to everybody else, but making sure that what we're doing is right for us and enough for us.
So you're my favorite now because
Oh,
seriously, like defining what success looks like to you is it's so the word important isn't even strong enough.
right.
And I just don't think I didn't take the time to assess that early on in my writing and publishing career. And I don't think a lot of people do because there's so many assumptions made. So what is today, because it may have evolved and it may evolve again, but today, what is success to you in the book space?
In the book space, I will be very happy to see this book out, The House of Plain Truth. And there's another book, the second book that I started writing. I really love the idea and the premise, and I really want to finish that book. And so
Yeah.
for me, I think getting to that point and writing the story that I want to write is what success is to me. Um,
Yes.
like everything else that comes, like is like icing on the cake. I
Yes.
will be happy for every bit of whether it's the accolades or the acknowledgement from various people, all of that, can come or will come or may come. And I'll be happy for that. But for me, it's the writing and the writing of the story that I want to tell. That is what is important to me.
So in the process of going through your drafts, and there may not be a definitive answer or a definitive number, but how do you decide when it is, air quote, good enough to submit it, whether it's to your agent or to your publisher or to whomever when do you make that decision and how do you make that decision that it's time to pass it off?
I think when I get to a point where I don't think I can do anymore. But I also, one of the things that I like to do when I'm writing is like I ask myself a question, or there's usually a question, like what the story is about. Like I usually have this one sentence. And then I ask myself if I have answered that question. And if I have sufficiently answered that question, then I think I know I'm there. I'm not always right. There are
Right.
times when I set it out and I have to go back and do some more work on it. But it's a part of it too is also just a feeling. Does it feel like the right story? It may not be 100% there, but if it's 85% or 90% there, I think that's good because there is still some work that an editor is going to do, and an editor is going to see
Yes.
some things that I would just never see. And that I think is a role of an editor to get you to that 100% or as close to 100% as you can. But you as a writer, I think you just need to get it as far as you can get it
On your
before
own.
you get
Yeah.
that kind of input.
How early in the process do you know what that question is?
It's sometimes it's by the second or third draft because I'm
But it's
right.
not always before you even start writing.
No, it's not.
Okay.
Sometimes it's not before and I think it's because the story shifts. So
Yes.
like like especially with The House of Plain Truth, because I was initially writing the story from the girl's perspective. Then I think once I shifted it to Perline's perspective, this older woman's perspective, that question or that overarching idea shifted a little bit. So then it's not just about finding her siblings in Cuba, but it's finding her siblings and the why, what is there behind it.
Right.
And so there, like other pieces that I then had to go back in and layer in as I figured out, like how that question, like really manifested in the book itself.
So then do you figure out when you say how to find them and why to find them, are you referring to like her internal struggle? Like what is it that she's looking to overcome internally through this journey?
Part of it is that, but also just just the basic plot.
Just the why.
Yeah, that's the why. The plot. I mean, why am I telling the story, and why should anybody
Yes.
care? But also, I think some of it goes back and falls back to the plot itself, because to say a little bit about the book, in
Yeah.
the very first chapter, Perline's father dies, and he asks her two things. One is to find her siblings who had been left behind in Cuba, and the second is to be his memory. And so, like as I was trying to figure out the why for Perline, it was, why do I need to be his memory? What is it specifically that he wants me to remember? Or he wants to make sure that us as a family, we don't forget. So all of that shifted and changed
Mm.
once I changed the main character or the perspective through which I was telling the story, because that would not have been the young girl's reason for being. She would not have been
Right.
interested in those things.
Well, and it's so interesting to me how quickly I grabbed onto that. Like when that was written in the very beginning, Be My Memory, and you don't mention it gratuitously more than a few times, but every time it's mentioned, it has its place because it reminded me as the reader how important that thing is.
Right.
That's a piece of it. And so now that's what hooked me is I'm like, what is there a secret? Is there a, what is it that is going to be so impactful about her finding these people?
Right.
So,
yeah, there is a little secret, I think.
Oh, exciting. Okay.
And I love family secrets. I mean, I think everybody should. I mean, it's nice and gossipy and, oh, really? This happened?
Do we need any more gossip? We need the fictitious gossip. That's what we need. That's good. Yeah, I would love for you to chat about DC Writers Room.
Oh yeah, the writers' room. It's a co-working studio for writers, and it's just basically for those people or people like me who can't work in a coffee shop or any kind of busy place with a lot.
Is that why? Because there's just too much going on in the coffee shop for you?
Oh yeah, I can't.
Okay.
Coffee shop.
Okay.
I can't. I just can't. I can't even work with music in my ears. I am not
Okay.
those persons.
Okay.
But yeah, so the writers' room. I didn't start it. I bought it from another writer who had been running it for some time. And so yeah, members pay a fee and they just have access to the space 24/7 to come in and write. If you're a morning writer, you can come in the mornings. If you write late at night,
great.
the space is there.
And what compels people to feel like I want to go to the writer's room as opposed to I want to go to a room in my own house?
Well, I can tell you what compels me.
That right. Mm-hmm.
I watch a lot of tennis, and there are times when I need to leave my house because there's tennis on. And yeah,
that's fantastic. It's like me and Netflix. Like, take me where there's not Netflix, and we're going to be fine. Oh, that's interesting. And when you sit in that focused space, you can get very, very focused, to use that word again.
It works.
Okay.
Yeah, I get focused, and sometimes it's just kind of nice because all you're hearing might be somebody else typing on their, laptop, and or that somebody else is in the space with you, or some other people, and they're doing the same thing that you're doing. And there is something that I get from hearing other people working. So I know, I'm not just, looking at, the internet on the internet or on Instagram or whatever it is. I'm actually working.
Right.
So there is, I think there is something about being in community, even though you're silently working on your own project, but you know that there's somebody else doing something or struggling in the same way, as you on a project. And so in addition to that, of course, there are opportunities, if you're, like in the break room, to have a conversation with somebody and talk about writing or absolutely nothing that has to do with the work, and not be alone, in your house, in your space. And I think it's just a nice space to have, somewhere else to go. And I think sometimes for me, being at home, working at home, I might really not know what to do, and just shifting location, I think sometimes helps me to get out of that rut or get back into something. And, I think sometimes it's just change.
Yes.
And, yeah.
It's such a common thing. There's something about the collective energy of a group of people doing the same thing that I think is very, I don't want to say motivating, but it just helps people move forward, because I will switch up. Some days I write here in my office, then I have a writing desk up in my bedroom. Some days I'm on my couch, because I too just need a different vantage point.
Yeah.
And coffee shops are challenging. I can work in them, but not for long periods of time, and not when they're extremely busy.
Right.
It's just too distracting. But I think the reason I go to them, we don't have anything like a writer's room. I mean, could someone please start one? I'm in Phoenix, anyone. But I'll sometimes go to a coffee shop, but if there's too much going on, I get distracted. If there's not a lot going on, it can work because, like you said, maybe I strike up a conversation with the barista, or like the novel I'm working on it's not set in a coffee shop, but a coffee shop is a primary location. So I'll get different ideas, but I can't do it for long stretches, and I can't do it when there's just way too much activity.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. That is distracting for me.
Yeah.
I think, like even if I know somebody's too close to me, I'm looking, trying to figure out, like, how close are you? Are you here? Are you looking at what I'm doing? Yeah. So I need,
right.
I don't need people too close to me. So yeah, coffee shop is just.
Yeah. Well, the other thing is the people, and that just made me think of it when they're on their phone, like they're on a call and they have their AirPods in, but they're talking so loudly and they're on their call. And I can't, unless I want their dialogue, which there have been a few instances when people have said things, and it has happened in coffee shops, that are so insane that I think as creative as I might feel on any given day, I'm never going to come up with that line. So right. I borrow it, but that is the only time when that is beneficial. And most of the time when someone is talking on their phone, they're not delivering lines that I want to have in my book. So it's just too much. It's too much stimulation.
Yeah, it's too much. Yeah.
But it's such an isolated pursuit, writing. And so being able to do it in the energy of other people who are also just trying to gut out that first or second or ninth draft.
Right. It helps. Yeah, it helps.
It does. It just reminds you're not alone in your insanity of trying to do this.
Right. Exactly.
Yeah. So the fourth book is in process now. Is there?
It is.
You're still writing it. So there's no release date or plan or anything of that nature.
Right. Yeah. I'm still working on it. It's, I think, pretty close to the end. It's close to the end, but yeah, I think I'm happy with it. I'm happy with this draft, which is good. Because, it's one of those two that has taken a lot of time and taken on a lot of different shapes. But I think, with both with the House of Plain Truth and the book I'm working on now, is that the story, the heart of the story has just always been there. And that is what I feel like when I get to that point where I see it really come together in a way that really pulls that heart of the story the way I want it. It is just such a satisfying thing.
Yes. Yes. Oh my gosh. Well, thank you for your time and joining me and telling your, all of the things. I will link all of your links in the show notes so that everyone can find all the things. I'm going to go get myself I was going to say a copy, and then I said coffee, and I think that might have been Freudian, but I'm going to get myself a coffee and a copy of Tea by the Sea. And I know I'm going to finish The House of Plain Truth this weekend. Weekends are like my reading time. It's when I just sink into the couch and read and read and read. So I can't wait to get back into this one.
Certainly. Thanks for having me.
Thank you so much for tuning in. If you enjoyed this episode, this is your friendly reminder to follow or subscribe, leave a quick review, and share it with someone you know has a great story or message, but isn't sure what to do next. Also, remember to check out publishaprofitablebook.com for book writing resources and tips, and to see all the ways we can work together to get your book out into the world. Again, thanks so much for listening, and I'll talk with you again soon.